We'll begin proceedings for today. So welcome along to the Environment Community Committee meeting for the 9th of March. The meeting is open to the public and also be live streamed. So I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today and also acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. So acknowledge the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, fellow councillors, also the portfolio lead of the Environment and Community portfolio in Councillor Tim McMahon. Also, we do have an apology today from General Manager Nick Hauser. So Nick's unwell today, so he was in the capacity, of course, of General Manager of Environment Community, but he was also the delegate to the CEO. So welcome to Anne-Marie, who's standing in as the Acting General Manager of Environment Community Services, the delegate to the CEO, and the Acting General Manager of Finance and Business Strategy. I'd like to open the meeting by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands that we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarowair peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Item 2, councillors, is attendance, including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. So everyone is present and we have nil to report in that regard. And also I just would like to mention that this week as well, from the 5th through to the 13th, is Parks Week across TRC. So we have over 150 parks across our region, and this is a great week in terms of where we celebrate Parks Week. I may just put him on the spot, but I may hand over, may just ask Councillor Tim McMahon, who of course the lead in the area with parks for the portfolio, maybe to say a few words just about Parks Week.
Look, thanks, Chair. My pleasure. Parks Week is alive and running. A few of our trails are recovering from a wet week last week, but they still are a very valuable part of the Toowoomba Region Trails and Parks Network. We have over 550 open space and park areas across the region, and if you've been to them all, let me know, because I'm yet to, but we'll put it on the to-do list. And it's really about celebrating everything parks, whether you're visiting the Organic Gardens on Gog Street or getting involved in Zumba or part of the Change Project. Get out and enjoy some part of our open space and parks this week. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. So good segue, councillors. Item 3 of the agenda is the proposed new dog off-leash area at Carly Hibberd Park. So I might hand over to Michael Condren to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Councillors, in July 2021, councillors endorsed the Carly Hibberd Master Plan, and at the time the adopted master plan provided for the inclusion of a new dog off-leash area, which was part of the proposed park improvement programme of works, which are currently commenced and are scheduled to happen over the next 2 years. Our follow-up consultation in relation to the dog off-leash area, in accordance with Section 11 of Local Law Number 2, Animal Management, whereby we are required to go to community consultation. That consultation provided indications through the responses that the community are now, less than 50% of the community are now supportive of the dog off-leash area in Carly Hibberd. For council consideration, the recommendation is that we consider the deferment of the provision of the dog off-leash area as previously proposed in Carly Hibberd, potentially progress with the construction of the balance of the other elements of the landscape of the master plan, and potentially review the community sentiment in a number of years' time with a view to potentially the re-inclusion of the dog off-leash area at a later stage, subject to community expectations and requirements.
Thanks, Michael, and also just acknowledge our senior landscape architects, Alison and Ingrid, who are with us as well, so they're available to answer any questions. So, councillors, are there any questions in regards to this item? Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. And Michael, you can probably guess what I'm going to ask. Car parking. How many car parks are there provided for this beautiful master plan of Carly Hibberd Park?
I'll just reassure your councillor that we have car parks provided. I might have to defer to your knowledge, Alison, of the detail of the master plan. If you.
Good morning. The number at this stage is 8, and they are on-street. It's 8 on-street car parks.
I'm sorry, for me personally, that's not nearly enough. And this is always an issue with our parks. People want to go there and enjoy them, and I always remember the argument with Queen's Park. We eventually got some extras put in there as well. So 8 car parks, and that includes for handicapped or whatever they're called now. Excuse me. So I just wonder whether it could be looked at to see whether more parks could be included. I think unless you can, it's great if people can walk, but not everybody can walk, and particularly with off-leash parks, people will travel from further afield to take their dog there. So there's just, unless you've got enough parks, where are people going to park? Are they going to park on the footpath across the street and with those houses, or where are they going to park? I'd like to see more car parks.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. I think we can go back and look. As I understand it, and you might, Alison, there's quite wide street parking in the general area, so there's a significant amount of informal car parking available adjacent to that site. We've created 8 numbers of off-street specifically designated car parks, but the inclusion of additional car parking would potentially require additional funding over and above what's allocated currently for the project, but we can certainly go back and, if needed, come to council with a proposal to include additional car parks, with a recognition that the car parks would necessarily incur an additional capital expenditure, which in terms of our district park provision, generally we have a requirement and an expectation we provide a level of car parking. That level of provision is normally somewhere between 8 to 10 car parks as our general provision for a district level facility. Anything over and above that certainly can be accommodated, but will have additional level of desired standard of service implications, etc. But taking on notice your request, Councillor, we can come back with information in relation to the potential provision of additional car parking.
Thanks, Michael. And I think future generations would appreciate any increased costs when we initially do the park now, rather than somebody have to knock down trees or something at a later date to increase the car parking there. And, we can be quite simple in our thinking here and actually indent further in and do angle parking or something like that. There are solutions out there, and I'd just like to see more car parks.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. So, Michael, we'll take that on note with the master planning process. So, Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just appreciate Councillor Summerfield's concerns, but Garnet Lehman has no designated car park, and on the streets, you pull along the streets, plenty of room. And I suspect there is here as well to park over the other side of the street and whatever, if you're parallel parking. So, I guess that if you interfere too much with that master plan, you're going to do away with some trees, which we really need in that area, because there's quite a lot of housing, and every single tree was taken down to put the housing out there. So I would like to see the balance kept between, and that can come back to us, but maybe one of the things you would look at is the width of the street, and it's a neighbourhood street, so it's not a through road. And at the end of the day, you are able to park on the other side. If that information could be brought back to us at some stage, I'd be happy with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. So we can note that as well. And I think, councillors, that is something that, and Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong with this, that can be looked at again through the master planning process today. What this specific report is looking at is obviously the deferral of that, or a recommendation of a deferral of the delivery of a dog off-leash park, which was originally proposed in the implementation schedule. So, so I've got Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Alison and Ingrid. I'm just interested in the process. At what point in time do you say, well, this is what people wanted now, this is what people want now? I sort of feel a bit, those poor people that sort of contributed the first time, do they feel a bit gypped that now, the decision's been overturned, I guess? And I don't think, it ever comes later, does it? Like trying to do something later, it's harder to get it done.
I'll just make a comment, and Alison might wish to add to the comment. I guess this is a slightly unusual and difficult position for council, in that we did extensive community consultation through the master planning process. At the time, we presented 2 specific options to the community, and I think 80% plus of the community endorsed the provision of the option, which included the dog off-leash area, and that seemed to be one of the key drivers for the differentiation between the acceptance of option 1 as opposed to option 2. So we were strongly of a view at that stage that the community were highly supportive of the dog off-leash area. The local law provisions and requirements to consult under that are mandated. Legislatively, we cannot designate a dog off-leash area unless we run through that community consultation associated with the dog off-leash consultation process. The outcomes of that consultation in this case have identified, I think a couple of new community members moved into the area subsequent to the previous sort of consultation in relation to the master plan, and one or two community members had strong views in relation to the non-provision of dog off-leash, and they've generated community views that perhaps the provision is not is what they now currently want. Council potentially could take a view that the overarching community sentiment previously expressed was the provision or the inclusion of dog off leash, and that was our guiding principles. But I guess it's a difficult position for council.
Can I just ask, Chair, Michael, could you just explain that to me again? So you did the initial consultation, and then the local laws mean that you have to do more consultation? Is that how it worked?
That's correct. In terms of the requirements, in terms of designating a dog off-leash area, we have to adhere to the principles and provisions of the Section 11 of Local Law Number 2, Animal Management Act, and that requires us to run through a community consultation process in relation to the proposed provision of a dog off-leash area. Community have the opportunity to comment on that and provide their support or otherwise. Council still retain the right after that to make whatever decision they determine is appropriate. But in general terms, you know, we're guided to some extent by what the feedback of the community consultation is.
Comfortable with that, Councillor
Thank you,
O'Sullivan?
thank you.
Yeah, but it is an interesting one, obviously, because the latest round of consultation came back at essentially 50-50. So, and it's actually a small catchment size as well in terms of the numbers that responded to it. So Alison might just has another point to raise on that topic.
I just want to explain that the consultation for the master plan, we went a radius of 1 kilometre from the park, but the local laws consultation was just 2 streets back. So they're different groups, and with an obvious overlap. We also gave people who had responded to the community consultation for the master plan the opportunity to respond to local laws. So there was that gap, but other than that, they're quite different groups, I think, with different ideas.
Chair, can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
So, would it be fair to say that maybe when the people who, the original lot, with the broader scope, the distance, would they have thought, oh, we've already responded to all of that and they've got all of our information, how we feel about that?
It's possible because that would have been their 3rd consultation, and unfortunately, because, as Michael says, because of the local laws, we had to do that consultation again. But we were always aware that it would seem odd to people that effectively they were being asked the same, well, similar thing for the 3rd time. So
Yeah, okay, thank you.
that's possible, yes.
Thanks, Alison, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor O'Sullivan. I've got Councillor McMahon.
Chair, thanks. Look, I have had a fair bit of time looking at this. I appreciate the community sentiment of this dog park. Now, if we look at the numbers, 51.6% said they were not in favour of it. That's a majority by a fraction. Keeping in mind one person equates to about 1.6%, so they got over the line by one person. It's still 51% of the community, however, and only 37 in favour of. If I put myself in the residents who lives in probably any of those 15 odd houses pictured in front of us, I probably wouldn't want a dog park right there having dogs playing and barking dawn until dusk over the road from my front lawn. So I can certainly appreciate the community sentiment around this, and you know, it's come back that 51%, probably the 33 people are those people in those houses right there who don't want a dog park over their front lawn. Fair enough. I would, I mean, if it's the officer's recommendation, we first got to point out that we're still delivering a really amazing park here in Carly Hibbert. It's still going to have all amazing features and bushwalking and those. The only point of contention is the dog walking park. But if I zoom out a little bit, where this park is situated, we've got the very end of Carney Spring, and it's right on the edge of town there, and it's right to the south is, you know, nothing but bushland until Hodgson Vale, and it's really right on the edge of the Toowoomba sort of urban area. And I know there's a heck of a lot of growth around the West, Carney West divisions at present, but I just wonder if overall this is the best spot for a dog park. I probably wouldn't see it as a destination dog park for anyone outside these local areas. So I suppose that got me thinking. Our SAL plan, which is attached, recognises the need for a dog off-leash park in the southern part of Carney Spring. That's in the report. We have about 500 metres north of here, Murray Cluett Wetlands, which is a designated dog off-leash park. My personal opinion is at present it's not done well because there are busy roads on two sides and a wetlands with native birds on the third. It is a gazetted dog off-leash park, but not fenced. And a fence there would make it, I think, an ideal place for a dog off-leash park. It's already gazetted. And if it were fenced, it would be a really usable asset to the community. Whereas Carly Hibbert, they don't want it, yet we've got funds set aside for it. And is probably, in my thinking, not the best spot for a dog off-leash park. So I'm actually wondering, the feeling around the room, I'd like to propose an alternate recommendation, Chair, that we investigate using the funds from the dog off-leash park here to relocate it with fencing to Murray Cluett Wetlands, as it fits in with the SAL plan that we need a dog off-leash park in the southern side of town. Chair, before we go any further, I have also read the conflicts of interest documents regarding this, and a park that the whole community seeks to gain from is repeatedly listed as not a declarable conflict of interest. But before we go any further, I would like my colleagues to decide, as a dog owner who lives near Murray Cluett Wetlands, whether I have anything to gain by moving this to, or by proposing that we move this to a different spot. I don't use dog off-leash parks with my dog on our walks, but I'd still like my colleagues to decide whether that is a declarable conflict before I raise this.
Sure, I might just, I think there's a few things in there to get through. I might, well, first of all, Anne-Marie, I might go to you first regarding the conflict. I would probably, anyway.
I would propose to my colleagues I do not have a conflict, but I would still like to get them to vote on this just because of, you know, proposing the alternate recommendation.
So we've got a no from the acting CEO. So unless anyone has any concerns around that verdict.
Mr. Chair, if the councillor requests for other councillors to decide, then we can certainly do that. I see absolutely no reason why we would need to go down that path, but if the councillor still wants comfort in doing that, that's the councillor's prerogative.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you bringing that up.
So what, is that what
So
you...
yeah, I would like a vote. Thanks.
I'm happy to move that he doesn't have a conflict.
Seconded by Councillor Carl. That's it. Yeah, okay. Anyone, any questions or anything further to Councillor McMahon in regards to the issue? So,
Point of order, if I might, Mr. Chair. We're looking at this. We're not looking at the moment. We're not looking at funds that are put here that the community requested. I'm not sure that it's an appropriate thing to be thinking about moving funds when we're looking at this actual proposed agenda item here.
agree.
To shift them to somewhere else, and I think that this needs to stand on its own.
Yeah, that's the next point we're
yes.
getting to, Councillor Taylor. As I said, there's a few things wrapped up in that. The first thing I want to get
Thank you,
cleared
Chair.
away, squared away, is the conflict one. So I do have a mover and a seconder. That Councillor McMahon does not have a conflict, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Okay,
Thank you for indulging me in the
That's
formality.
passed unanimously.
So-
Now, the second part of that, I
Mr.
think...
Chair, we probably need to give reasons, and I'm happy to elaborate.
Sure.
alongside the mover. Part of the reasons, as I would say, with your permission,
Go for it.
is that this is a piece of public infrastructure that is being able to be accessed by, I stress, the majority of community with, or percentage of community with as dog owners, and that is a vast percentage of the community, and it's public infrastructure.
So we'll just get that.
Right. We're talking about Carly Hibbert here. Councillor
Yep.
McMahon's talking
Yes,
about Murray
yeah, but-
Coolidge.
I know, but we're dealing with a conflict. We're dealing with
It's the
him
councillor's
as a
request to
conflict,
deal
exactly,
with it as a
yeah.
conflict aside from
So this is completely separate
the
to
subject.
Okay, so we've got a, what's this? CEO, you're comfortable with that? The wording that may, so we've got the councillor McMahon may participate because this is public infrastructure able to be accessed by the majority of the community, and councillor McMahon has nothing more to gain than any other community member. As the mover, you're comfortable with that?
What he said.
And the second is comfortable? Okay, all right, so did we vote on that? Oh, we've done that, yeah, okay. Okay, so no conflict. So the second part I said, which is also crucial to this, is along the lines of where you suggested you're heading with a motion just regards moving of potential looking at funds. I think I might ask Michael to make comment about that, please.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the current capital funding allocation for Carly Hibbert Park, that's been managed under our LGIP programme, so the funding is designated under LGIP, and we don't have capacity to move that LGIP funding to potentially a non-LGIP project. And I need to stand corrected, Ingrid, I wouldn't imagine Murray Clued is an LGIP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and there's a number of issues in terms of if we defer the funding and wish to progress it in the future, if we were to look at, say, a development at Murray Clued, it would take us a period of time to work through the implications and to deliver it. So potentially, the suggestion was that if we defer the funding, it would be deferred and not necessarily utilised this year. We've got a lot of other capital works programmes that we've got to deliver this year, and our staff are pretty well engaged in attempting to ensure we deliver on the current capital works programme. Rather than deferring, another alternative for council would be to potentially reallocate that $90,000 that's currently allocated for the DOLA to other activity nodes within Carly Hibbert Park, as opposed to deferring. What that would mean into the future, we would have to come back if there was ever a need to progress with a dog off leash area in Carly Hibbert in the future. We would need to seek additional funding from council over and above what's currently allocated in capital budget for future progression of a dog off leash area.
Thanks, Michael, for that clarification. I appreciate your point that if we say no to the dog off leash in Carly Hibbert now, we would have to come back to us in the future. I'm not convinced it's the right spot for a dog off leash park at all. So I'm happy with the officer's recommendation in that part. Regarding the funding to move this, I appreciate we've got LGIP funding and those kind of things, and it may not be in this financial year. And I think there are ways forward for you and your team to work around that moving forward. I'd still like to move ahead with an alternate motion, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, if you wish to put it
Yeah.
forward. I do, just in saying that, I understand, Councillor Taylor, I have a number of people lined up with questions, so there still will
Okay.
be that opportunity for questions,
Well,
but as
I'll
per
wait.
your right,
Thanks,
you're well within your rights if you wish to move a motion. Okay, so I've got Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Michael. Michael, I'd ask, correct me if I'm wrong, but as with all of the master plans, it's a case of evolution, and they're not final decisions, and that's why it's a master plan. That'd be fair enough to say, over any park and any off-leash dog area.
That's correct. We are currently progressing with the detailed construction drawings for the provision of the entire park. We have some funding allocated this year. We've got significant funding allocated the following year with a view to wrap up the project in 2024. So we're getting to the nitty-gritty of progressing to detailed design and determining exactly what is going into the park in accordance with the concept master plan that council endorsed. But there is opportunity at this stage still to amend and change scope as required or as directed by council.
Yeah, and I think that was my take on always been on a master plan. It's a roadmap. It's not set in concrete. All the elements, the basic fundamentals are there, and it gives an idea of funding, in particular around LGIP. Look, with that in mind, I'd like to flag that that if Councillor McMahon's motion is not successful, that I would like to put that we go back to the officer's recommendation. And the reason for that is because you guys have a pretty good handle on the prioritisation around spending of capital and the investment of that into areas such as these, and there's always opportunity, as per legislative requirement, for us to revisit at a later stage for this park. So we've followed you guys have followed the process. We've done the master planning. You've always gone out to the community with the view that a master plan is a roadmap. It's not set in concrete. And you've done your legislative requirement around, and you've gone over and above and filled the gap between those two distinct groups. You've given them people opportunity outside of that area, so I'd flag that we go with that if this other one goes down.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. We've got Councillor Carol Taylor.
And I'm not sure whether this should be in a debate, but I'd take you back to the figures that we had in the initial consultation and even the next one, which was much. First of all, I have to say I have two small dogs that I walk every morning. I don't use off-leash parks for the very fact that I have small dogs, and it's my biggest nightmare that large dogs would come, and I don't use off-leash parks. But many people do, and this is a perfect spot for an off-leash dog park, which should be within walking distance of the people who have their dogs and want to use it. So, you know, I mean, if you're thinking about it, and the way I've been around this table for a long time with consultation for different matters, and most people only engage once. They would have engaged at the master plan stage, and most of the people in favour of it, always the people in favour just go once. The people who were passionately against are in there for the whole time. So that's the imbalance in a continued consultation. And you usually have those very noisy and going, and they've got a right to their opinion, but it becomes such that it becomes quite imbalanced, and the people who have given you their opinion on the positivity of an off-leash dog park in their neighbourhood area, which is where they are, they shouldn't have to put their dogs into a car and drive to an off-leash dog park because they want to have their dogs play. Councillor Tim, they don't often bark and everything else when they're in off-leash dog parks, no more than dogs that are locked in people's backyards that don't go anywhere. And I've been round dogs for a long, long time. So at the end of the day, I mean, I just want to point out to my colleagues that I'd agree with Councillor Carl, it's a master plan, and we can come back to it. And I do agree with the actual officer's recommendation on this, but I just bring everyone's attention to the fact that in any sort of consultation for whatever you're doing, you will have people who engage, the people who are in favour and think what you're doing is okay. They'll engage just once, but the people who they seem to take on, and it's, you know, they're very passionately against it, so they come again and again and again, and they're watching. But to go only 2 streets back, I think is just probably not adequate consultation, because if I live in town now, so I live in a court, and I, in my daily walkings, would go within a radius of, I go a different way every day, because we've got little laneways and things in Middle Ridge that you can go, but I would cover the areas of about 5 or 6 streets within walking distance of those parks. So I don't think the second lot of consultation has been probably conducive to capturing the people who have dogs and would use it. So I point that out because I think the first one, adequate for sure, master planning stage. Second one, don't think it's been adequate to capture what we would be able to call a good grasp of what the community around there is thinking. So I make out again, this is a neighbourhood off-leash dog park, not a large one, a neighbourhood, which is very much in the right place because we've got a whole lot of young families out there and there's an opportunity to take the children and the dogs at the same time round to the park. So I definitely support the officer's recommendation and we can come back and do a fresh lot, go further and get a more adequate or more meaningful response to whether that's needed or whether it isn't. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Look, Councillor, also, I know, I do understand, obviously, we are bordering into debate at the moment, but I did allow the first few speakers to speak, so I'm comfortable to allow it to continue along that vein. So I'll take that as a comment, Councillor Taylor, but we've got a few other questions before we get to where we land. Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Chair. Mine was more a question about the process, and we are where we are, but I just wondered, and perhaps Kevin might comment from a local laws perspective, when we go out to do master plans in this case and for other consultation, can we at that point flag that we either need to go down a local laws methodology for an off-leash dog park in this case, or can we flag that this will be used as the consultation for the legislative requirement for off-leash dog parks? It just seems we've got ourselves into a situation that perhaps we can learn from for future parks in this case, or perhaps we can't. I'm just not sure, understanding what Alison said, that perhaps the scope of consultation is different, but perhaps that needs to be set out when we do the master planning for site. So perhaps through you, Chair, to Kevin, if there was a local law that would prohibit us from using a master planning consultation exercise as the consultation for the local law.
I'll ask Kevin Jeffries, the Manager of Regulatory Services, to comment.
Thank you. Through the Chair, the local law is specific, so you wouldn't be able to offset one consultation to satisfy another. You could run them in parallel though. So at the time you were thinking about master planning, and if that was what was coming out of that initial consultation, you could run the local law process at the same time. In this case, we've tried to work through the whole master plan and look at some of the detail and the funding, and then gone out with the consultation around the local law. So it is a time difference, but we could have done them in parallel as an option.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that might be something perhaps we could take on board down the track, because I tend to, I guess, put myself in the shoes of those 85% who suggested they'd like an off-leash dog park from the initial consultation, and wonder if I would get engaged in any further consultation, because in my mind I've already voiced my opinion and it's gone through. The master plan's been endorsed by council, there's an off-leash dog park, and now we go through this process. So given all of that, the recommendation I think is fair and wouldn't preclude down the track Councillor McMahon's option, perhaps if this wasn't then identified as an off-leash dog park. But I think we're one step away from doing what Councillor McMahon needs to do at the moment. That's not particularly what this one's about.
Might just ask Ingrid to comment in regards to that.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a comment if I can, because I've been involved a lot with the local law process, and from my experience, it's very difficult to do the local law process in the master plan, because you need a specific area that is then the designated dog off-leash area. And unless you know exactly that area, master plan's very vague. You get down to the detail and it's a different area. You have to go to consultation again anyway, because the area has changed. So I've had some feedback recently from King & Co solicitors about this same issue. So that is, if you're changing the area of the dog off leash in any way, you have to go back to the community for consultation. So the master plan's not sufficient detail.
Thanks, Ingrid. And I think also, Michael, if I can just seek clarification here. So if we go with what the recommendation is here, is it still has been identified the need for another dog off-leash park in the southern area of town. Whilst we defer this, that still continues, correct? The planning or opportunity towards that eventuating somewhere in that area?
Potentially, we have a range of areas for dog off-leash, and we've got a strategic plan in terms of our progression of dog off-leash areas. I can't actually recall specifically which ones are next on our list, Ingrid, but Have you got any comments in terms of which other ones might be? I think we've got a number in the regional areas that we wish to progress, but one thing we can do, as we discussed potentially, is progress with the completion of the installation of the overall parkland. And at that stage, if there's a wish, we could go back out and seek consultation around the potential re-inclusion of the dog off leash at that stage. That can happen at any time, depending on what councillors' sort of views. But it might be better to work through the current process and wait till we get to the end of the park improvement plan and then determine whether or not there's an appetite for the inclusion. And if it's not there, we could reallocate it towards Garnet Leam or one of those other designated locations potentially.
Thanks, Michael. Councillor Sean?
Thanks, Chair. Just amazes me that what we're looking at here is agreeing to the officer's recommendation, which will be a further, until the community support can be verified. That means a further consultation. You heard the master plan, you've had one according to the bylaw, you had a follow-up one, and now the fourth one. With great respect, let's get the blooming thing built and get on with it. I suspect that's really what the officers want to see happen here, despite the recommendation. Whilst it's a matter of debate, I'd really like to see that be the end result today, that we don't have to deal with it ever again here. My question, though, is in relation to little dogs that Councillor Carroll raised before. I don't have a conflict of interest, but I have a family member who has a very little dog and shares the same fears. I think there's two separate ones up here at Harlexton, from memory. My question is, what extra area, what extra cost is involved in providing the two varieties of size of dog parks?
Ingrid?
Just a couple of things in regard to that. Unfortunately, because of the size of Cully Hibbert Park, the dog off-leash space was undersized to what we would normally like to deliver in a dog off-leash area. Typically, we'd like to have 4,000 square metres, but when we went to the detailed design, we could only achieve about 3,500, thereabouts, square metres. So it was undersized to begin with. So to split it into two areas is problematic. You're going to create more conflicts. So our experience in our conversations with animal management is that the smaller space you have, the more conflicts you have between dogs. So certainly we'd like to be able to achieve separate dog areas. There's been identified areas where we could do that, and we have, if we had money allocated towards dog off-leash, we can make those improvements. But in Cully Hibbert specifically, it would be problematic, undersized as it is, that to split into two areas would be an issue. And certainly.
Cost?
Oh, cost, yes. So the cost of the fencing per se is about 50,000, thereabouts. Other improvements like paths, furniture, and that ancillary, and could be implemented within the park regardless of the fencing. So we certainly would like to continue with the furniture, the tree planting, and the like as part of those improvements, regardless of the fence. So.
Is that the additional cost for a small dog park as well? That's what I was after.
Oh, the additional cost to implementing it.
If we were going to, irrespective of the area, if we were going to go ahead and have a big dog, small dog park, how much extra
It
money?
would depend on the area, of course, as to how much fencing you have. But I would say about 20,000 thereabouts.
Thanks, Councillor Sean. I've got Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Of all the things that I thought I was going to be doing today, this wasn't one of them. So that's why this is such a good job. I remember before I got on council, I went to the Horn Park Hullabaloo. And that was about the consultation too. I can't remember the details of that, but that kind of has left an indelible image of all those angry dog owners. I was wondering, with the master plan, so the original people that were consulted, would they advise that the master plan would have had been endorsed, or would they? I'm just going back to thinking about them thinking, they've done their contribution and this is what they're expecting. and before we do anything. And why can't you just, why couldn't you, why did we do the minimum consultation for the local law stuff? Is it just cost and not do the original area?
I think that might be a question for stakeholder engagement. All I can say is that we were then just following that particular process.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Look, we do have Kate from Stakeholder Engagements to enlighten us.
So in terms of consultation, we have previously gone out to local neighbours when we've done a dog off leash policy, as we have this way. To go out to the suburb would take us between 4 to 6 weeks to arrange a mail out via Australia Post. So sometimes it is a timing issue, which I think it could have been in this case. In addition to the mail out to the residents, we also did call flutes in the parks, we did a media release, we emailed out to everyone that had participated in the previous consultations, which is about 150 people who we had contact details for. So those people were kept in the loop as the master plan process did progress. And we had some promotion on our website as well. So.
Kate, can I just clear up, Mr Chair, thank you. So the original people that you consulted with, when you had to do the local laws stuff, you got in touch with them if you had their email address, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Thank you. And can I just ask another question maybe to Ingrid?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kate. Just to give me a context, you're talking about the fencing of dog off-leash parks, and you ideally want about 4,000 square metres, was that what you said? The one in Queen's Park, that's not fenced, how big is that, roughly? Just to give me an idea. Like, do they always need to be fenced? Well, the Horn Park one's not fenced, is it?
And just to give you a bit of context, the majority of our parks were previously dog off-leash areas before we did this planning and the desired standards of service. So our desired standards of service have come subsequent to those areas, 24 areas being endorsed. So the new ones that we have recently done, Rosalie Walk at Kingsthorpe and Corey Street Park at Oakey, are both within our desired standards of service sizing. So this is a way moving forward to be better than what we were in the past. I can't say exactly how big the area at Queen's Park is, but I would say it would be close to that 4,000 square metres.
But the preference is always to have them fenced now, is it?
Yes, and there's problems in Queen's Park, as you might know, with the heritage listing, so we can't, the state heritage said we can't fence that area. So we've done what we've done with the vegetation barriers. So.
Yeah, I don't own a dog, but I went there with my nieces and it seemed to be really working beautifully without having to be fenced, but I don't know.
And yes, just further to that, certainly in our report we've said that fencing is not necessarily desirable. Certainly we prefer to do it as a mechanism that is obvious to the community, which has happened at Corey Street Park, I might say, that it's a vegetated barrier, a distinct area, not fenced. But certainly in areas like this where it is close to neighbouring communities, fencing is desirable just for the community safety, close to a playground area, for instance. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Harris-Sullivan. I've got Councillor Carl.
No, I'm right, Chair. I just want to get on with it.
Are there any further questions? Mayor Antonio.
Well, I just look at the recommendation, Mr Chairman, and I don't know whether I don't know what the story is, but look, that council defer the delivery of the dog off-leash area as proposed in the Carly Hibbert Park Master Plan implementation schedule until such time as the community support can be verified and the project budget allocation can be amended accordingly. Look, I think that's pretty clear. It's quite specific, and I don't think much of the discussion around the table has necessarily disagreed with that. My view is we ought to get on with it. Sorry, but it's been a long discussion.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, so Councillor, if there are no further, question? No. Okay, so if we go.
I'm happy to move the.
Well, I did. Councillor McMahon had flagged an alternate motion. Do you wish to put that forward?
Yeah. Look, I agree with the officer's recommendation. Council defer it at Carly Hibbard Park. I would like to propose a second part to that recommendation, please, Chair, that Council investigate a fenced dog off-leash park in the Murray-Cluett wetlands area, which is corner of Spring, Carney and West Creek, to satisfy the need for a fenced dog off-leash park in Carney Spring.
Okay, so that is the alternate motion, councillors. Do I have a seconder for that alternate motion?
That is an addition to the...
An addition.
point.
So we can get it up on screen if... Yeah, so that's the alternate motion that has been put forward. Do you want to repeat it, Councillor McMahon? So,
Council investigate a fenced dog off-leash park in the Murray-Cluett wetlands area, which is corner of Spring Street, Carney Street, and I suppose you'd call it West Creek, to satisfy the need for a fenced dog off-leash park in Carney Spring.
so that would become so basically the motion becomes in two parts. So do I have a seconder for the alternate
Sorry,
motion?
can I just get Councillor Summerfield's advice on this, Chair?
Sorry, Jim, I just think that if you do that, it means that you're still going to be progressing both, is how I see it, even though, because you're going to then go back to the community to verify their support in the first paragraph, but then you want to investigate Murray-Cluett as well. So do you want both to be considered, or do you just want to get on with Murray-Cluett
first, and then, you know, if it doesn't go, we can go back to one. So wording...
So Councillor McMahon, are you happy with that wording, or do you wish to alter it?
And maybe the acting manager of Park Community Environment, we have other areas that are on our schedule, and there are other areas of our community that have asked for fenced off-leash dog parks. So in this, we're looking at this particular place.
Yeah, so I think...
And then we're grabbing something at random for somewhere else.
But I think the Manager of Parks and Gardens pointed that out before, but it is within Councillor McMahon's right to put forward a motion. So are you comfortable... Councillor McMahon, can I ask you, is this your alternate recommendation?
Yeah, it is. I just... it's not a... We develop both. It's we go to Murray-Cluett. If that doesn't work, we go back to consultation in the first one. So is Michael Condren happy with that wording for... what I'm trying to get across here.
I might ask Michael to make comment there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McMahon. I think perhaps the way forward could be that if we go back out for community consultation whenever it is, in 12, 18 months' time, we put forward the two potential options, one being Murray-Cluett, one being Carly Hibbard, and ask the community to determine which of those two options are...
That'd be great.
...are their preference, and Council can then make a determination based on perhaps the responses to those community surveys?
Chair, I don't wish to take up too much more time, but I'm happy with the acting GM's recommendation that we include Murray-Cluett in future community consultation surveys instead of what's there.
So wording of that, so you're still keeping the original part as written, correct?
And then Council include Murray-Cluett wetlands in future community consultation on dog off-leash parks. Include the fencing of...
As an alternative.
Yeah.
We'll get the motion sorted first before we get to, and it needs a seconder. So, but we're just working through the process of the motion being put, Councillor Taylor. So Councillor McMahon, so as it sits at the moment, so that Council include
the fencing of Murray-Cluett, because it's already a dog off-leash park.
Do you want it fenced? Sorry.
Yeah. Council include the fencing of Murray-Cluett wetlands in any future community consultation. As an option in future community consultation in the Carney Spring catchment suburb.
in the Carney Springs catchment. Okay, so are you happy with the wording as that?
It's Carney Spring, not Carney Springs.
Yeah, so the council include the fencing of Murray-Cluett parklands as an option in future community consultation in the Carney Spring catchment.
I'll just change one word, Murray-Cluett dog off-leash park, because it's not a parklands, it's already a designated dog off-leash park.
Dog off-leash park. Okay, so we'll remove park lands. So the council include the fencing of Murray Clewett Dog Off-Leash Park as an option in future community consultation in the Carneys Spring catchment. You happy with that wording?
Thank you, Chair, for staying
So
with me.
that, so that motion has been put. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Summerfield. Does anyone wish to go into debate? Sorry?
Sorry, I've just got a question,
Question?
if I could. So in relation to the community consultation, can we ensure that it is more broadly done and that the results of that comes back as part of the report when it does come back to us? Just, because the discussion has been today, whether there was enough community consultation and how broad an area that went. And so we would need to understand, we need to get enough people providing input so that we really do understand the community's desires. And so I'd appreciate if that community consultation could be much more broader. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair and Councillor Summerfield. Yep, we'll ensure in discussion with stakeholder engagement that we broaden the extent of that consultation, and noting Kate's comments in relation to probably the timeline constraints, we can ensure we at least gain that kilometre or suburb sort of overview.
Okay, I've just got another wave of questions. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank
And
you.
I've got Councillor Taylor and Councillor Sean.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Councillor McMahon. So am I right in understanding, or to the acting GM, am I right in understanding that what's before us with this amended motion, we do what the council officer's recommendation was, which included going back out to community consultation, and the only difference is when we go back out to that community consultation, we would include in that piece of correspondence, how do you feel about fencing this park, this dog off-leash park?
Correct. I think thanks for the question, Councillor Von. I think it comes back to the community wants a fenced dog off-leash park. The residents of right next to Carly Hibbert don't. So there's got to be some sort of a need for it. So I'm happy for this to be thrown in the mix when we go to community consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think to you, Councillor McMahon, I'm not familiar with Murray Clewett Dog Off-Leash Park. Not familiar with any of the dog off-leash parks, actually. So are you asking for that to be fenced to satisfy the need for small and large dog areas? Is that why you're asking for that one to be fenced if it's already a dog off-leash area?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Melissa. Absolutely. Okay. I'm of the impression that dog off-leash parks should be small and large dogs, and Carly Hibbert is not enough land to do that, no. So in my opinion is not suitable. The area as it stands now is a dog off-leash park, however it's not fenced. I don't know too many people who take their dogs there because there's 60k roads on two sides and Duck Pond on the other, and I probably wouldn't take my dog there off leash, it'd run over on the road. So to my opinion, it's a great area for dog off leash park, but rather useless at present. So thanks for the question.
And it can be separated into, Michael, it can be separated into small and large dog. It's big enough for that area?
Yes, as I understand it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Melissa. I've got Councillor Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Question, I'll keep it as a question through you to Michael. Michael, I understand your willingness to assist in any way outside of your original recommendation to Council. But my question to you is, why do we have an off-leash, a dog off-leash strategy, and why is that prioritised? And why would we step away from that with this second part of the recommendation when you've more than capably said to us that it's tied with LGIP, and under that overarching strategy that I implore councillors to remind them that we have, why would we step outside of that policy and the prioritisation of that? I agree with the Mayor's comments before. Let's just get on with it, not complicate this issue for this park, and let's stick to our strategy and prioritised under LGIP and capital expenditure and the need as identified and prioritised by people with expertise.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Yeah, I understand there's sort of views either way. In the context of our strategy in the longer term, there is consideration in our strategy for the potential inclusion of the Murray Clwyd wetlands for investigation for future dog off-leash provision. Having said that, we councillors could make the determination to stick to the specific recommendation as per outlined and just deal with that, and we can deal with the Murray Clwyd as a separate matter, but it's really a consideration of council as to which view councillors wish to progress.
Thanks, Michael. Comfortable with that, Bill? I've got...
Could I just make a comment on that, Chair? Just really quickly to Councillor Bill, Murray Clwyd Wetlands is listed as a proposed dog off-leash park in the strategy as outlined in page 21 of today's board books.
And with your indulgence, Chair, I already know that. But why have an overarching strategy for any area of business of council if we are going to step outside a prioritised delivery of that strategy? This is a potential where we're making decisions on the run here over a topic that we are looking to facilitate Carly Hibbert, and we're broadening the context outside of a prioritised strategy. It's in the strategy, I get it, but it may not be at this time. So why have a strategy is my question.
We're in debate,
Thanks.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
I know, and I've let quite a bit of it
And
go, so I'm comfortable
I
with that,
wish
so
to
thank
move...
you. So I've got another question with Councillor Shine.
Just
Last question.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Carol. My question is, probably I may not understand it fully there, but we're going to go, if this is adopted, we're going to go through another round of consultation, and we're going to expand it to the Carney Springs catchment as well as people living around Carly Hibbert. That's right, isn't it? According to that. So, you know, my question will be to Kate or to the acting general manager is what is this going to cost us? What, you know, as well as the time lost, we've lost an hour today, but as well as the time lost before getting a dog off leash at the park, what's it going to cost in dollars to do this fourth round of consultation over this dog off leash park?
Are we going to debate, Mr Mayor?
I'll probably, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Shine. The costs associated with the surveys and whatever, I might just need to get your assistance, Kate, if you wouldn't mind. Just to also remind councillors, we're not proposing to go to immediate consultation. The suggestion would be we would wait maybe 24 months and then consider our options. And in that intervening period, if councillor wish, if there wants to be an information session as to the way forward, we could do something like that as well as a way to sort of deal with the current issue.
Sure. So we'd probably be looking at around about $800, I'm speculating, for a mail out, which would be printing and delivery to a suburb. And then we'd also have the costs of reinstalling call flutes, as well as, I guess, labour costs to just run the consultation, analyse the data, those types of standard costs, but the main cost would be the mail out.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, councillors, so we've given it a fair run with questions, comments around it. So I've got a mover. So to bring us back to where we were, we've got a mover and a seconder for the motion that is before you. So that's the inclusion there of item 2, which is include the fencing of Murray Clwyd Dog Off Leash Park as an option in future community consultation in the Carney Spring catchment. Would anyone like to go into debate?
I want to speak against it.
All right, so Councillor McMahon, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will reserve my right and sum up. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Carroll, you'd like to speak against?
Thank you, Mr Chair. And I don't know how we've gotten to this. I really don't understand. It's not about what we think we want. It's about what our community wants. And this is LGIP funding that we're looking here. We have a duty under LGIP to provide infrastructure where the development has happened. So that's how that works, number one. We've got the master plan consultation was in favour of an off-leash dog park, fenced off-leash dog park. It's very, you know, the area there is quite adequate for a fenced off-leash dog park. It mightn't tick the box completely, but it's not far underneath it. The local law consultation, I'll just bring your attention to, was 49% in 2 streets back. And 2 streets back in a little area like that, like I live in Middle Ridge now, I understand 2 streets back is not very far. So you're probably not capturing all the people who've got dogs. It's a neighbourhood off-leash dog park, which means people should be able to get up in the morning and take their dogs down, or in the afternoon, without having to put them in a car, without having to walk 2 kilometres or somewhere to get to it. The consultation has already been done there. And we're now introducing another site without fair consideration of the residents in both areas. I think that it completely changes the siting of the neighbourhood off-leash dog park when we've led the people there to believe in the master plan that that's what we're looking at putting there. And I think it's an at-random addition, because I can tell you where I live there's no off-leash dog parks either. So, you know, and it's been there, it's not LGIP because it's already, which is what's the case around Murray Clewett. We have a duty under LGIP to be funding these things. We've said we were. We have a strategy. Why are we not following the strategy? In many cases, this is probably operational. I think where we've failed here, not failed, but I think in the second consultation, to just go 2 streets back is just certainly, in an urban area with small lot sizes, is just probably not getting the actual overview of the locals that you need to get. And harking back again to any kind of consultation, you're going to have a much stronger against than you are for. So I think that this completely changes it. I absolutely cannot support this. I think it changes it for the residents there that have already engaged, and it's just something that's been plucked at random, and I can't support it.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Speaker 4. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think this resolution provides the opportunity to ask our community. We're consulting with our community on preferences, which is good. It's a good thing. It means that people are being given the opportunity to have a say on which of those parks they would prefer. And to me, that provides valuable input to us as a council. It has a larger area, which I think it's another reason why it should be included as part of the community consultation. It has car parking opportunities up to above it, which is available the majority of the time. It's not operational by any stretch of the imagination, I have to say. This is very strategic in what we're dealing with here today. And what's wrong with us opening up to opportunities? Why do we lock ourselves in and not accept that change could be an opportunity for a better outcome? We don't always know everything that when we make decisions that we make. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we don't know what other opportunities are out there. And I think that we should just be open to giving our community options. And I think, you know, going out and just saying, well, okay, this is it, that's the only option you've got, is one thing. But if we can offer them 2 options, I think that's invaluable. So I really support this second option added to the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. Speaker against, Councillor Carl.
Thanks, Chair. I think I've highlighted the main reason, but to reiterate, we've got a plan, let's stick to the plan. It's the overarching strategy for the whole region, off-leash dog parks. Officers have come to us with recommendations in the past around prioritisation of this under a capital works program and LGIP. The reason why I don't support it is because we are breaking our own rules around the capital works program. And we already know how tight budget constraints are and the discretional spend we have for decisions such as this today. I say we exhaust I agree with Councillor Nancy in opportunities, but we need to exhaust those opportunities at the appropriate time as the next program piece of work for an off-leash dog park presents itself within that overarching strategy. I say again, why do we have a strategy? And there are opportunities within that strategy for many off-leash dog parks to be retrofitted, which we know many examples of. So I can only stress, let's not make decisions and policy. This isn't really policy. We have a policy and a strategy in place. But let's not make decisions that are in direct conflict with our capital works rollout and the LGIP program. And let's not confuse the issue for the local community in Carly Hibbert Park and broadening it out at this time. It's inappropriate. It may very well be in the next 6 months, 12 months, or whenever that is programmed within the overarching strategy and prioritisation. So I implore councillors to stick to the game plan that we have so that we have a coordinated, sensible spend in a timely manner. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. Do I have another speaker for the motion? Okay, so I'll close the debate. I'll hand back to Councillor McMahon to sum up as the mover.
Chair, thank you, and thank you for the commentary around this. I welcome it. This is included just when we go to community consultation next. We say, what about the Murray-Cluett wetlands? If I read the strategy, and to disagree with Councillor Carl, my recommendation is following the strategy. The strategy says we have a suburb of 8,100 people, and the only dog off-leash park they have at present is Murray-Cluett wetlands. A great site for a dog off-leash park if it were fenced. At present it's not, and in my opinion, that makes it almost unusable as a dog off-leash park with fast cars on 2 sides and native birds on a 3rd. We have done community consultation with Carly Hibbard Park. It's about 500 metres south of here. The community in a 1K radius, as I understand the community consultation, said they wanted a dog off-leash park. The community within 200 metres said they don't. So that to me tells me that Carly Hibbard Park is not the right site. It's too close to residential houses. It's too small to adequately put small and large dogs in different sections. And I would propose that when we go out to community consultation, I'm not saying build it tomorrow, I'm saying what if we put a question in there saying, would you prefer the fencing of Murray-Cluett wetlands as a better option for this? And I think that's a fantastic option for our community. It's a large area, it's got the space we need to do this properly, where we can separate our dogs, keep them safe, and have all of the community enjoying the best of our outdoor areas. Carly Hibbard Park, great park, bushland walking, a lot of play nodes being put in there, but I don't think it's the right site for a dog off-leash park. So in closing, my motion does stick with the strategy of dog off-leash parks, and it would be an extra asset, I think, to the whole of Carney Springs area, rather than on the edge of town, where if you look at the sort of the pink dot in the proposal of this in the strategy, it's only servicing a very little part. The rest of it is all bushland, whereas Murray-Cluett is right in the middle of Carney Springs and would service a catchment on all sides. So I think it's a great motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. So, councillors, that closes the debate. The motion is there for you. So, defer the delivery of a dog off-leash area as proposed in the Carly Hibbard Park Master Plan implementation schedule until such time as community support can be verified and the project budget allocation be amended accordingly. And the second part is include the fencing of Murray-Cluett Dog Off-Leash Park as an option in future community consultation in the Carney Spring catchment. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? So motion is lost. So Councillor Carl, you foreshadowed.
Yes, that we go back to the original motion.
And thank you. Mr Mayor can second it.
And Mayor Antonio seconds that motion. Is anyone wish to go into debate?
So, Mr Chair, if I could just ask Councillor Carl and Councillor Antonio if they added up there that we had a more comprehensive, or perhaps we can deal with that when the time comes, maybe the better time to deal with it. But I do believe...
Around consultation?
Yeah, I just have to say that in my view, the consultation, and it's not a criticism of anything, and we've heard why, but I just think it needs to be more comprehensive.
Yeah, so then the general managers give me a nod that will be...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael.
In the process. So Councillor Carlos has moved, so the original officer recommendation, Mayor Antonio has seconded it, and that just being that council defer the delivery of a dog off-leash area as proposed in the Carly Hibbard Park Master Plan implementation schedule until such time as community support can be verified and the project budget allocation be amended accordingly. Those in favour? Those against? So that motion is carried.
Mr Chair, I know with your indulgence, can I just ask a question of our Acting General Manager? Whilst it might be desirable, my understanding is we don't have separated small and dog park areas at this point anywhere.
We have a couple, Ingrid, you might do. Ruthven Street.
Oh, Ruthven, yeah, okay. But it will be, that's only got one, yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Maybe something for the future.
Thanks, councillors. Thanks to Alison, Ingrid, Michael for that item. So, councillors, we'll move to item 4. It is the consideration of changes to local laws, register, prohibition and restriction of animals in public places. So we do have Mark ready, so our Principal Conservation and Pest Management Officer, to answer any questions on this one. Michael, did you want to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, councillors. Council has maintained a requirement for dogs to be kept on leash in public areas such as public parks, except for approved dog off leash areas for an extended period. Council continues to update and amend our register to respond to community concerns and community requirements. In 2015, Council included 4 areas: Waterbird Habitat, Cooby Dam, Perseverance and Crestbrook Dam in the register prohibition and restriction of animals in public spaces. In February 2021, councillors might recall, they endorsed the undertaking of further a community consultation regarding the potential inclusion of additional public open space areas on that register of prohibited and restricted animals in public spaces to respond to ongoing concerns being raised about potential conflicts between dogs and flora and or fauna in particular. So subsequent to that resolution of council, staff have undertaken a complete survey of community views regarding the restriction or otherwise of dogs in outdoor spaces. There's an extensive survey findings presented as part of the report to council, and together with a recommendation that council consider going to further consultation with a view to including 11 additional bushland park areas into that register of and prohibition and restriction of animals in public spaces. So Mark and Ingrid are here to answer any questions in related to any of the consultation or anything additional that councillors might wish to question.
Questions, councillors? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
I'm just happy to move, Chair.
Okay, are there any, well, I've got to move it. Are there any questions then before I go to that point? So so I've got to move it. Do I have a second for that? Councillor Carl. So I'll hold the mover and second of the motion, but we'll still allow for questions, I think. So Councillor Shine, you have a question?
Thank you. My question is that local laws, it says, were support the prohibition was removed in 2011, consequent upon amalgamation, I think. But could you, were the reasons for it being removed then? Or was it just an oversight, more or less?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. It's actually quite an easy one to respond to. It was an oversight at the time of the adoption of the model local laws because they had not been fully consulted with our community, or anything that we would want to have included in them had not been done at that stage. It was a bit of a rushed process. Council was under pressure to have those laws adopted by the designated date when the old ones would become defunct. Council then decided to adopt the model as it was and to later progress any changes to mould them to our own needs.
Any further questions? Councillor McMahon.
Quick question. Thank you, Chair. Just to Mark, so we're just going to community consultation. It would probably mean we have a debate similar to the last one on all 11 of these some point moving forward. Is that how it's going to work?
Councillors, I actually think the process on this one will be somewhat simpler than dealing with the Dola area, which is very local area centred and relates to the use of the whole park. What we're looking at here is a proposal by council to inscribe these areas on the register. All we need to do in terms of complying with the legislation there is to go to the whole of the population. Say council wishes to make a change to the local law. This is what we're proposing. Please make any what's the word I'm looking for here? Any submissions that you feel appropriate. Council will consider them. They'll come back to council for a decision.
Okay. No, that's great. I would like, when this comes back to us, we have the opportunity to not do the whole package, but perhaps some and not others. Will that be possible?
Council will always have that option. Council's requirement is to consider all submissions appropriately made. So we will be going to the community asking them to make any submissions. We will be then presenting them back to council, summarising whether those submissions were appropriately made, what those submissions were, and making recommendations based on that for council's consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. If there are no further questions on this one, I do have a mover in Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, a seconder in Councillor Carl. Does anyone wish to go into debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Those against? So carried unanimously. Thanks, Mark. We go to item 5, Councillor. So it's draft local law number 1, administration 2021, and subordinate local law number 1.3, establishment or occupation of a temporary home. So Kevin Jeffries to present this one.
Thank you. Through the Chair, this is the last part of the process. It's been through a whole lot of stages. It's been to council, it's been out for consultation. There were a couple of comments made of support of what we were doing. This was to correct an error that was made in the original, when we adopted the original local law, around the terminology we used, in particular in relation to the Building Act requirements. So this is the final part of it. You adopt it. There's some procedural stuff we need to do in Gazettal, but it's the last part of the process.
Thanks, Kevin. Questions on this? Sorry, Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. Kevin, caravan would have been already included in temporary home. There just would have been ambiguity. Is that the biggest?
No, the ambiguity was around the use of the word temporary home.
Okay.
Because that conflicts with the Building Act and the building requirements. So people building a house can have a temporary home and they can get a permit for that. That's where the conflict was.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Are there any further questions on this one? Councillor Summerfield?
I'll just quickly, can't help myself. I'm glad that's been clarified and happy to move.
For mover, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Does anyone wish to enter into debate on this one? So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Oh, we have obviously an absentee in terms of vote-wise there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. We're on a roll now. Item 6, councillors, is the Timor Regional Council Reconciliation Action Plan. Are they here? Otherwise, we can, are we happy to, or otherwise?
I'm happy to move it.
Yeah, if that's the case.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
And you'll second the recommendation? So what we have before us, are there any questions around this one? So it would be moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Carol Taylor. So yes, if there are any further questions on this one, so does anyone wish to enter into debate?
Can I just make a comment as the mover?
As the mover, sure.
I just wanted to make a statement that this is a very important start of a process that this council is undertaking to recognise our First Nations people. And I acknowledge Councillor Carl in the room today, Bill, I acknowledge you, and I acknowledge Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan as on the committee for the advisory group of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders, and I acknowledge Lisa Goodman, who is in the current substantive role of leading this charge. This is something that we all need to take ownership of as a council and as a community, and I'm sure we'll do that. This is a very important part of who we are as a community, making sure that we acknowledge our First Nations people, their contribution, but also how we as a council can do better with working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in our community. So more than happy to move it.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. I think well said. Councillor Carroll, the second.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I'd endorse all the comments of Councillor McDonald, and with my comments yesterday, I mean, we're coming from behind, but we really are moving towards something positive for our First Nations people in their, their deadly, I guess, bringing them to where they should be and recognising the contribution and the culture that they bring to our life. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll, and we welcome right on cue. The team have arrived. You'd be happy to know we've actually got a mover. So confident are they in this report that we do have a mover and a seconder, and probably goes again with saying Councillor McDonald acknowledged your work in this space, Lisa, so thank you for your commitment to this. Look, Councillor Carl, would you like to? Yeah, sure. So question from Councillor Carl.
Just a question, if I may, Chair, and to either Officer Lisa or Gary. In the presentation we had about this, in the information session, the duration process is 2 years for the RAP. Can you give me some understanding of how, if this is to be a living document and embraced as part of council's culture, what sort of mechanisms do you identify potentially as on the way through this first 2-year program, or I call it a program? What sort of mechanisms do you see as important in highlighting opportunities or issues as they arise, so that we just don't get to the 2-year period and we go, oh yeah, it's time to dust it off and have a look and go again? Have you got any ideas or thoughts, Lisa, on how we address those opportunities or challenges on the way through, so that when we get to the 2-year point, we've got some intelligence and information collected to make it better, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carl. I think the important part and the philosophy that we're taking on this journey is business as usual. So everything that we embed in this practice is about giving ownership back to operational staff to be able to implement that. So when we establish our terms of reference group, basically we'll have a representation of each of the branches across council that will form part of that, to make sure that that connection of knowledge is going back and forward, and that responsibility lies with operational staff to be able to embed that. Not me specifically in my role or community development as owners of the development of the Reconciliation Action Plan, that it's very much ownership relies on everyone playing their role in the reconciliation journey across the whole organisation.
I guess, if I may, Chair, Lisa and Gary, I guess what I'm asking is, if there's a theme emerging and it's a good opportunity or it's a challenge, how is that feedback handled in the interim? Because I'd hate for it to fester for 2 years and then we address it. Do you know what I mean? I get that there's operational responsibility at an officer level, but the last thing you want to be is a meat in the sandwich to the broader community, and the interface at council, how that we interface with the community, and very much aware of challenges around Western systems and models and the interface, and how council identifies or not with that. So yeah, I want to be sure that there's an avenue, like a community development officer has the avenue to progress through the organisation. I want to be confident that we're taking those opportunities as they arise.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Carl. And I believe that would take the normal process that it would when we raise any issues that we face in community at the moment through to council. So I wouldn't envisage that there would be too much change in scope in how we would escalate those issues outside of our normal process. But yes, I'm fully aware that this is not going to be an easy journey, and there's going to be things that arise out of this conversation, out of this journey, that will need escalation to council laws in council in the future. So I don't think we would be holding off on that conversation for 2 years. If there was things that come to fruition during those 2 years that are a high priority for consultation or feedback that needs to come to council, then we would escalate that prior to those 2 years being an outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. So, Councillor, so we do have a mover and a seconder of the motion that is on the floor. So if there are no further questions, I will put it to the vote. So those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Lisa. And that concludes the Environment Committee meeting for the month of March. Enjoy the rest of Parks Week. And I'll now hand over to, or we break. We might call for a 15-minute break. So we'll start so I'll close the Environment Committee meeting, and then we'll commence, if you're saying, what would you say, 10 minutes? So at 10:35. Thank you, councillors. Thanks.
Welcome to the Finance and Business Strategy Committee for the month of March. Welcome to Mayor, Councillors, Portfolio Lead, Councillor Shine. Thank you, Councillor Kerry, for your work in that area. I'd like to welcome those in the gallery and those who are watching online. Appreciate your attendance today, in person and online. I'd also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Acting General Manager Anne-Marie, as well as the delegate for the CEO, will be introducing the items as we go through today, and I welcome Trevor, who's here for his item as well. But Anne-Marie, if I can hand over to you first for the, we don't have any apologies, any leave of absence for future committee, if there's none of those. Declaration of conflict of interest, I have none noted, but if there are any as they come through, whether you or someone else you feel has a conflict, please feel free to make that known. We then move to item number 3, which is the annual review of Council to Chief Executive Officer delegations. So Anne-Marie, I'll hand over to you for this one.
Good morning, councillors. So the Delegations Register is reviewed on an annual basis to ensure continued legislative compliance. The CEO is not seeking any changes to historic powers devolved in his position, and nor has there been any need identified that would warrant such. Therefore, there are no proposed changes recommended to the Delegations Register as presented here this morning.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Councillor Carl, question? Sure.
Just an overarching one, I guess, Chair. On page 2 of 3 of the report, the officer, Leela Fallon, has highlighted in the very bottom of the page, the last paragraph above the heading Risk Management Matters, says this council has not yet conducted a review of its approach to its delegations with this aim in mind. However, it is something that may be worthy of further consideration. My question around that is, I'd like to probably get the feel of the room, but I think that there would be a good opportunity for council to reassess the process, the overarching process around delegation, and not so much what will fall out of that is what makes up the delegations register to the CEO, but it's more about, as she said here, a review of its approach to its delegations. So could we actually set some time aside for that to actually investigate? Well, let's unpack it. Let's see if it's up to date. Let's see if there's other ways or better ways of doing that. And I guess my overarching thinking is that we exist to provide service, so let's do it as a council. You know, whether it's the CEO, operations, or elected, we are here for service to the community. So if there's better ways of doing this more efficiently and relevant to our community, then let's take some time aside to review that process.
Acting General Manager, you're happy to take that on board?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one on notice and work it out with the governance and legal team.
Is that all right, Chair? I mean, I'm not...
Yeah, no, well, Anne-Marie will certainly follow that through the governance and legal team. It's mentioned there, the paragraph above it talks about what that paragraph actually says. So it seems to be that that's a natural thing for us to have a look at some stage. Just when that might be is a conversation I think Anne-Marie could have with the CEO. Councillor Nancy?
Thanks, Councillor Jeff. I too was having similar thoughts when I was looking at this. When I read through a lot of them, and I can tell you I haven't read them all, there appears to be lots in there that really don't need to be in there. And I'll give you an example. On page 92 of the report, or 312 on board books, it talks about fluoride. power to give the Chief Executive notice stating the council has made a fluoridation decision and to publish that notice. Well, we give that delegation in the actual report, so why would it be on the register? So it got me thinking that I think the processes aren't right. That we could have, if you wanted to keep a record of delegations that have occurred in the past, that would be one thing, but a current register wouldn't look like that. And so I really think it does need a review. There was another one further on that on page 100 of the report that talked about, it was concerning acquisition of land, and that the CEO could deal with the objections to taking of the land. Well, to me, I think that would be something that would actually come back to council, and maybe it was delegated on one occasion, but it's in there as a delegation always. And so I think that's what's happened, is that we've given delegations for certain decisions at a council meeting. It's gone on this register of delegations and it becomes a permanent delegation. And I don't think we've got the process right, is my thought. And I've been here 10 years and we've never workshopped these delegations that I can recall ever in those 10 years. So I think there is opportunity for us to do something about that.
It sort of flows on from a conversation with governance around the detail that's in this, and we have amended ones from 2017 in here that go back then to 2012 as decisions, and so yeah, it's
Needs tidying up.
Well, yeah, I think I disagree. That's for sure. Councillor Antonio, then Councillor Von Hoff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the acting GM, wouldn't much of this delegation be entrenched in the Local Government Act? Clearly spelt out in the Local Government Act. When I look at it there, that's the feeling I get. The directions are clearly given by the Local Government Act, and I just wonder what we can do to change that at this level.
Sorry, Mayor, I was actually having difficulty hearing you there. Look, I'm happy to take on a review of the delegations and bring it back to councillors.
If you can hear me now, what I in fact was saying, the impact of the Local Government Act on delegations would be very, very strong, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That's all. That's your question, Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, I am actually just confused about the wording of the recommendation, because it seems to be in conflict to what Councillor Carl was just saying on page 2 of 3 of the report, because the recommendation is that council conclude its review. Page 2 of 3 says that council has not yet conducted a review of its approach to the delegations. So I'm
So I think they're actually
confused.
two different, I think we're talking about two different things there.
different
I think in the
reviews.
recommendation, we're talking about the delegations as provided, but I think then on page 2, it's a review of the process.
Okay.
Which is what Councillor
So
Carl was suggesting.
So perhaps then it's worth articulating that in the actual recommendation, that council, in addition to what we've got there, something like in addition that council conducts a, whatever Layla's words were.
So from page 2, page 2 then?
That council conducts a review of its approach to its delegations.
Yes.
Full stop. So this one's covered off, and then in addition, we do what legal and governance has identified.
So, a comment on that same thing, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you.
I'll just go,
So-
if that's on the
okay,
same
thank-
subject, and then I'll go to you, Carol.
Yeah, look, further to my comment, and that's why I raised it, because that whole section under issues and responses, whilst we have a Local Government Act, we operate under, good governance, and they suggest ASX principles and adopting a board charter, of which we are a board, local government, and those 2 dot points are very pertinent there. describe those types of decisions that are of sufficient strategic importance that the board would like to see elevated to it for their collective decision-making, and then the second point, talking about other such matters aren't that in an efficient and manner that the CEO deals with. So I raised that because we actually haven't had a holistic discussion around what do we determine as strategic as a collective, as a board, and what does the Local Government Act define as strategic, because there's some clear guidelines in our charter as local government elected representatives. So that's why I particularly raised it, and thanks Councillor Rebecca for the addition, because I think that's I'd like to see that come forward in the not too distant future, notwithstanding there's lots of things in the pipeline that we need to deal with as well. So.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Chair. This is something we have to do under the Local Government Act. The delegations go to the CEO that keeps the place running. The CEO can then delegate to other people. And this is what this is about. The fact that we want to, and this has to be done on a regular basis, and it's legislated. If we want to go back and have, and I'm not sure that a review of its approach to its delegations is the right wording there, we should be looking at our delegations to the CEO at least once a year. I have a diploma in local government administration, and that's what the optimum thing is, to go through, not on a piece-by-piece basis, which is, have us around here for hours, but to have a look at it and make sure that they're up to what they should be for the time that we're in. But this is one of the most important documents that Council has, the list of delegations for Council, and it really needs to be adopted by this Council in a formal process to keep the place running, and that's what this is. Anything else about reviewing it or anything else should come back to us in an information session. I'm not sure it's about the approach to its delegations. We have to have delegations, and in a situation like what we had a couple of weeks ago with the floods, the delegations are all in place and everybody knows where. You don't have to come back to have the 11 people around the table to have actions taken place that need to go. So you have everything covered because you have that head of power. The delegation is there and the CEO can delegate to whomever is the appropriate person. So that's what this is about. And any sort of review should come back as part of, not approach. The approach to delegations is the same approach with everyone. You have a look at what needs to be changed, and we would be expecting governance to bring that back to us rather than going through the whole document line by line. So that's under the Local Government Act, that's what we're doing now. We're doing what we need to do to keep the place running. If we wish to, I have to say, I have been round here when we've had a workshop on it, but I can't remember how long ago that was. But it's timely we do, but I think they're two different things.
So perhaps, and I actually think we're aligned on that, maybe the first recommendation is that Council adopt the Council, take out conclude its review and just the Council adopt the recommendation, as that's one, and number two is the Council conducts a review of delegations. A review of its delegations, which will include all of that anyway. It includes
Mr Chair, some of the delegations go to the Environmental Officer and other things like that, but a review, not the approach. I don't agree with that word being in there, but
can we debate that later, Mr Chair, if it needs to be debated?
Well, it's a bit silly.
Well, point of order here. I made a suggestion, Mr Chair, and it is, and I'm prepared to accept the advice of our legal governance team around a review of its approach to the delegations. And it's in the context of those two previous dot points, as is the prerogative of any board, be it local government or otherwise. Let's not get mixed up. No, there's no disagreement about the status quo of what we're here to do in this report. But I raised it as a to-do, and the acting CEO, GM, has more than ably said, I'll take that on and we'll bring it back.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Carr, where we've got to is you've actually used the words of the governance of the author in the report, which is where that's come from. So
That's right.
That's the actual wording that Leila has actually provided. So we've got two items there, number 1 and number 2, that council endorses and that council conducts a review of its approach. I'm not sure why that council endorse, the council, that's not, you don't need that. The council endorse the chief executive delegation, so take out the council in the top one, if you wouldn't mind, Kirsten, and just the council, and that is actually a sentence. The register of interest, council to the register of delegations, council to the chief executive officer. Oh, well, if that's the case, you need that whole wording. The council endorse attachment 1 entitled Register of Delegations, council to the chief executive officer. And then that covers it. That's what you're trying to do? Yeah. We'll just let Kirsten do that first, if you don't mind, Councillor Carroll. So it's actually not just endorse, it's actually the council adopt. We're actually adopting that attachment 1. And then the council conducts.
To be presented to council at a future.
The council adopt attachment 1 title. Yeah, just if you wouldn't mind, Kirsten, switching attachment 1 to the end and just take out titled and just say adopt the, and then you put in brackets attachment 1 on the end. Is that right, Anne-Marie? Yeah, so I don't want to be a nuisance here, but they're actually, instead of having that council, can you have just that council adopt so-and-so and then number 2, that council conducts a review? 2 separate things so that they... So two sentences, that council adopts that, and then the second one is that council conducts a review of its approach to delegation, to its delegations for a future report to council.
You need approach in there?
We've just taken the wording out of Lelia's commentary, Mr Mayor, which is actually in the report on page 2, which covers off all those areas. I've got Councillor Nancy and then I'll go to you, Councillor Carroll, that council conducts a review of delegation to present a future meeting of council. That's fine. Councillor Nancy?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is starting to look good. I just wonder whether we need to have some sort of timeline in that second one to ensure that it, you know, sort of within 6 months or something like that, so that we actually get in and do it. Because it'll be a big job. It won't be, you know, it'll be a couple of hours workshop probably to go through.
Well, how about we perhaps add to the end before the next adoption of the register?
That's 12 months.
Yeah, so it has to be done within that period.
But we have to live with all of those delegations until then.
Well, that's what we're adopting. If you wanted to add something different to that, I'm just saying that at least it needs to be done between now and the next 12 months.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to do that. And, you know, it's not about going through line by line, Councillor Taylor. It's about defining rules which would remove a heap of them or add whatever. You define a rule. And it's a bit like having a rule with an email. If you're receiving emails from someone you don't want to get, you create a rule and get rid of it. And that's what you would do with these delegations, not necessarily go through them line by line. So I look forward to it, and I'm glad we've made this I think we're making this decision today. We haven't voted yet.
Okay, well, we've got those well, that's the one recommendation in 2 parts. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Chair. A lot of these delegations are prescribed under the Local Government Act, and regardless of what we think about them being superfluous or whatever, many of them will not be able to be removed for reasons that we would have explained to us. So we should go through them once a year. We shouldn't go through them line by line. And the fact is that the CEO will know why we have them and in different sections, our general managers and whatever else. There's be very few of them, even though they look superfluous in there, there'll be very few of them that aren't needed. And even stuff that's happened in the past, sometimes that has to be captured in the delegations. So it's not what we think, and we probably shouldn't be going through them line by line. We should be coming and presented to us with a praisey, I suppose, of what may or may not be needed, because a lot of this is defined under the legislation in the Local Government Act.
Sure. Well, that's certainly will come out through that second part of the recommendation, which will be good. So have someone move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Carl, seconded by Councillor Summerfield. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Item number 4. Yes. Item number 4, Community Engagement Policy Review. Anne-Marie, would you like to introduce this one? And Trevor's here to talk to it.
Yes, so the community engagement policy was reviewed late last year in line with the policy framework review process. Proposed changes, as outlined in the report, are designed to streamline the policy, but not to change the intent of the policy. And the major change is the recommendation that a section on community development officers be removed, as it was felt that would be better placed in a dedicated community development policy. I'm happy to hand over to Trevor here, who will address any questions.
Thanks, Trevor. Did you want to add any further before questions, Trevor?
Good morning, councillors. Thank you. I just wanted to elaborate a bit on the reasoning for removing the section on the community development officers. It was a bit of a hangover from a 2011 policy, and as a result of internal consultation with community development officers, they felt that their section should be greatly expanded to talk about their capacity building and the principles of community development, and it would have meant quite a lengthy extension to the policy. And then upon review, we felt that that actually might sit better in a dedicated community development policy rather than this policy, which is really aimed at general approach the council takes to community engagement. So that's the reasoning for wanting to remove that section. The other smaller points, there's a couple of minor edits in it. We're looking to streamline the language a bit, but certainly not looking to change the intent of the policy at all. And the other feedback, which is really important to us, is adding in the accompanying guidelines, but not necessarily in the policy, specific reference to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and also a reference to harder to reach communities, particularly homeless people, which we work in conjunction with community development to reach anyway.
Thanks, Trevor. Any questions for Councillor Tim?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Perhaps just a comment. I support the removal of that paragraph. It seems like our CDOs are an amazing resource. They work hard, but they seem to be the first point of call of everything in a small town. And when we've got, in a large area, in a large organisation like this, we've got a whole community engagement team, I support taking it off the CDOs and into the community engagement. So just welcome the change. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Councillor Tim, thanks. Councillor James?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Trevor. My question, I guess, I was a little puzzled by this one. I understand the intent probably from an internal point of view around streamlining and not changing the intent, but the more I went through it and you look through the track changes, my concern with it, and if I could get some comment on, to me, I wonder, and maybe I'm reading too much into it as well, but I wonder some of the lines that we've taken out, to me, from a community point of view, looking at it from a community point of view, not necessarily internally, almost, I don't know if it does, I think it does change the intent. I mean, a few of the lines are out, just example, 377 on board books, don't know what page that is of the report, for example, we're taking out a line saying ongoing commitment to connect and stay connected with all residents and communities in our region. And then when we're talking about not making reference to CDOs being the first point of contact, where I would have thought in a lot of these smaller areas, that is their first point of contact, and they're always going to do that. And I just question, the intent is that we're not changing the intent, but I wonder through the wording if we actually are, from a community reading perspective.
Yeah, I take on board that feedback, councillor. The feedback from the community development officers themselves is they don't see themselves necessarily as a first point of contact, although in practice that often happens. Their view was that customer service branch should be the first point of contact and to go from there. And I guess the line about the connectedness, I felt it wasn't specific enough about community engagement. The connection to our community comes through a whole range of channels, customer service certainly, all the communications, the media we do, a whole range of things. So I felt it was a bit general, and in terms of wanting to streamline the policy, I just wanted to condense the language in it a bit so that the focus was on council's general approach to community engagement.
Does that give you any comfort, Councillor James? You want to use a couple of examples, perhaps?
I appreciate this and I understand it from an internal point of view, but I just mean to me, to say the policy demonstrates councils, like to remove a line like that, to me that's pretty succinct in what we do. The councils, the policy demonstrates councils' ongoing commitment to connect and stay connected with all residents and communities in the region. That's pretty succinct to me, and that sums up engagement with our communities, and particularly when we're talking about a lot of these smaller regional areas, and we know the ongoing concerns in those communities about connection to council. And my concern with this is and whilst I appreciate that it's not our intent, to me, that's the first thing that stood out to me reading it was, to me, the intent of how we engage with these communities, to me, does change with the removal of some of these words. That's, as I said, I could be, on my own in that, but that's just the way I see it. And even, so I'm just flicking through different notes that I've made on it. I mean, even when we're on page 380, down the bottom, we're removing the framework is not designed to limit community engagement techniques. Council will use techniques including its corporate online consultation platform, etc. And we always talk again about that technology side of things. It doesn't necessarily, and I understand moving to the future it may, but still to this point, that's not everyone's chosen or best way in a lot of those smaller town and areas that they can communicate or feel connected to council.
Yeah, we certainly recognise that the technology, particularly the USA website, is a valuable tool, but it's not the only tool, and it's not for everyone. We recognise that there's a certain section of community that don't feel comfortable using technology and want to interact on a more personal, face-to-face basis. So this policy, I guess, is designed to encompass all the different channels that council uses to engage with the community.
So I guess what we're saying there on that particular page, Trevor, is it right suggesting, so that's page 380, down the bottom, Councillor O'Shea's pointed out, including its corporate online consultation platform, means that's not the only?
No, yeah, I guess we're saying it's one tool, one tool that we use. But I'm certainly happy to include that line about the connection back in.
Yeah, and I reiterate, I understand the intent of it. I said internally, I totally understand where it's going, what it's saying, what we say we're going to do. But from a community point of view, to read this, to me, I don't think taking out some of those lines, to me, I don't think speaks to the intent of what we're trying to achieve, is the point I'm making. But I'll...
Okay, well, we may come back to that and perhaps look at that first dot point that you've raised there, a couple of occasions, ongoing commitment, etc. Councillor Cole and Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Chair. Trevor, refresh my memory. Did we have a workshop or an info session on this review? I may have missed it. I don't know. Or have we had anything like that in the lead up to this?
No, I don't believe so. This review came about as part of the regular policy framework review cycle.
So I'm just wondering, given the strategic nature of this and the absolute critical importance, because in the dot points, the reason for the recommendation talks about council as an accountable, effective, efficient, sustainable, there's an accountability not just here for us as councillors to our community, but to the organisation as a whole in providing service. I'm just wondering, should we defer this? Because Councillor James raises some points and there's interpretation. I guess if we went around the table, there'd be a whole lot of interpretation about some of the meanings or intent. Or I'm just wondering if it'd be beneficial if we had a bit of a workshop, even at the very least, so that we get a rounded understanding of some of these inclusions, exclusions. Workshop that and come back at a future council meeting to adopt the policy review. We're not going to be out of time with the policy review. There's no real mandatory requirement.
No.
Can we achieve that in a comfortable amount of time?
Yeah, I believe so. I think it's
So
quite
I'm suggesting
possible.
we may defer it because I too read some of that and I thought, you know, and if the boardroom's unclear, then, you know, then ultimately some of the management could be unclear and how that's rolled out could be unclear. And so given our accountability as an organisation that exists because we have a community that wants us to exist, to manage their affairs, I think it's pretty important we have a review and then come back. So my suggestion is we defer it.
Okay, we'll keep that on the table as an option perhaps. Councillor Carroll, we'll go to some more questions. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm okay with it the way it is with a couple of... I do totally agree that first dot point, ongoing commitment to connect and stay connected with all residents and communities in the region, I think that should be put back in because I think that's just a statement up front that that's what we're going to do. I do agree with the changes back over on page 6 of 8 where it says we've had a lot of focus on your say, and I've been told by a lot of people, you're quite right, Trevor, and you know your audience, so a lot of people who don't engage with that and would prefer the older fashioned methods of bringing out their contribution to consultation, which I know you do. I have to say that you do very, very well. So at the end of the day, taking, you know, it's still there, but in cases that we've had before, a lot of people feel that because they don't use that method, that their comment isn't as, you know, and whether that's right or whether it's wrong, I don't know, but that's what they feel. So I'm quite happy with this to go the way it is, and but with just those few tweaky, that top one, I think it says it all.
Yep.
The CDO, the CLO, whatever we call them now, I don't think in many cases, I certainly know out in our area, they're not the first port of call. It's usually the councillor or customer service if there's something wrong. And at the end of the day, as a councillor, you know, particularly with wet weather and everything else, trying to get our community to call customer service first, because that's, after all, what we've got to do. We've got to find someone. You know, we can't do it, so we've got to find someone, and if it's really an emergency, you're adding another couple of layers there, and you should go immediately to customer service because, you know, people ring you because they think, oh, you can help me, but I have to do the same thing. I have to either go to the general manager or someone else to try to get through to that. So I think taking them out and giving them in their own area, I can understand their frustration. You know, as long as people know where to go and we can direct them to the right area and they don't feel they're being forgotten. And I think that first statement says that. It actually says what our overarching, you know, ongoing policies should demonstrate, demonstrates, and thank you, Councillor James, because I actually missed that, ongoing commitment to connect and stay connected with all residents and communities in the region. And I think, and there's another thing in there somewhere where it says something about all areas being equally, in somewhere it says that. I can't just put my hand on it. So I think that's an addition, and I think that's really good. So I'm happy with it the way it is, with a couple of changes that put back in. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carroll, I'll take those just as comments. Councillor Carroll, are there questions that you might have that we could, in fact, explore now to give comfort to this?
The reason why I suggested we defer it and workshop it, because that's our principal role as a, given the strategic nature, that's our principal role as a councillor under the Local Government Act. And just listening to one councillor's comments around interpretation, I had the same sort of feeling. I have some around intent, around what our original policy position was around IAP2. So I think it's too important not to actually take the time. There are some operational policies that we don't review. They're at an operational level. This is a strategic policy. This is the bailiwick of the boardroom to actually give it due care and attention. I think it's the code we will live by for the next period of time until the next review. So in general, I would, and given the length of service around the table, that's varied amongst councillors. It'd be much better for the council to be somewhat more united or have a clearer understanding as a collective boardroom, because this is the message that the organisation's going to live by, the code around how we connect with our community. So that's why I'm generally saying, hey, let's take a step back and make sure we've got a combined understanding. We may not all agree, that's not what we're here for, but at least we've got a clear message going forward. That's my overarching reasons.
Okay, well, Councillor Carr, there is a recommendation there. If you wanted to test, I'm happy for you to test for a deferment of this to a future date, given that the answers we've had from Trevor are that it's not going to impact the delivery of what we're doing at the moment. Then happy for you to test that. If that goes through, that's fine. If it fails, then we can revert back to some of the changes that Councillor O'Shea mentioned. So if you're happy to move a motion that the matter be deferred for consideration of future, given that it's not a critical matter.
Sorry, we've got a mode of operation now. The wheels aren't going to fall off, but I think given the extent of the experience around the boardroom table, it's a new term, has been quite a change in the makeup of the boardroom from experience and backgrounds. It would be really good to have a unified, please, I'm saying that respectfully. I don't mean anyone knows any more or less, but it's a critical document, and I think it's important for us to get a collective understanding of that. So, and I'm happy if I get rolled on that, I get rolled. But
no, that's okay. You've moved. Councillor Summerfield, did you had your hand up to second that? Okay. Well, Councillor Carr, I think you've spoken enough to that. Is anyone wanting to have debate on this situation? Question, sure, Councillor
Thanks.
Beckett.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor O'Shea. Councillor, deferring it, would that give you the opportunity to flesh out some of those issues that you were talking about?
Yeah, I suppose it would, but I mean, I think it's probably more. My point was more, I just think it needs a bit more positive wording around what council's intent is. Because as I said, I understand what we're trying to achieve, but for me, it's the wording around the intent. So if something could be come up with that today, I could live with that as well. But I think, to Councillor Carr's point, if there's others around the room that have other ideas of how they wish to see it fleshed out, it's probably a good opportunity. But for me, it's more some wording around the intent of it, and it might be just putting that line back in, from my point of view. Councillor Von Orr.
Thanks.
Is there any need to go into debate for this, councillors? If there's not, we'll put the motion before us, which is that the matter be deferred for consideration of future Finance and Business Strategy Committee meeting. Those in favour? 7 votes. So that's carried. And of course, it goes to the ordinary meeting next week as well. Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate that.
Thank you, councillors.
Councillors, we move then to item number 5. And again, Acting General Manager Anne-Marie, you'll be presenting this one on behalf of Natalie. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Chair. So this report before you at the moment, councillors, is the first annual review of the quota tender consideration plan for the procurement of cemetery memorials. And you may recall our reason for bringing this to you last year was to simplify procurement of memorial items for grave sites. So Council's operational area has no decision-making power for the purchase of these items, but completes the purchase on behalf of the bereaved family. The report highlights that the expenditure for these items is contained within local supplier spend. So it is intended that this quote or tender consideration plan will continue without a further review until such time as a change is required that requires a council adoption.
Thank you. I love that last sentence. I think that's a good sentence rather than have to review these more regularly than is required. Councillor, is there any questions in regard to this? There's no questions. There is a recommendation there before you, noting that all of those that are mentioned in there are actually local suppliers, which is a very positive. The motion there before you is that Council adopts the quote and tender consideration plan procurement of cemetery memorials at attachment 2. And 2, the Council notes the plan will be internally reviewed on an annual basis and only presented to Council where there are proposed changes as a result of the review or otherwise. Someone happy to move? Moved by Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? That motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move then to item 6, councillors, which is the Register of Fees and Charges, and of course we had a pretty lengthy session on this as well. Anne-Marie, if you'd like to intro this one. Thanks.
Thank you. So the 2022-23 Register of Fees and Charges and Register of Cost Recovery Fees and Charges is presented to Council for adoption. It's standard practice. The fees and charges are reviewed annually in line with budget development, and consultations undertaken with general managers, and elected members. So we've had a couple of council information sessions, and the feedback received, the discussion and the changes have been incorporated into the documents presented here today. So the proposed fees will support the provision of relevant goods and services to the community. So there are cost recovery fees, which we need to ensure we only recover the cost of delivering those goods or services, and our commercial fees, which are based on, again, on ensuring our costs are covered, but also reviewed with the market. Fees and charges can be changed at any time throughout the year. So if at some stage we do a review and the costs and the charge is not covering the costs, there is an opportunity for fees and charges to be reviewed at any time and changed by resolution of council.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Councillor Sean?
Just a question to Anne-Marie, if I could. Are you confident that bearing in mind the increases of cost of living, cost of materials that we've spoken about here often in recent times that have escalated, are you confident that the fees and charges as outlined will address those imposts?
Yes, Councillor, I'm confident that the fees that we're proposing now for implementation from 1 July this year do represent the costs incurred at this time, but at any time, if costs continue to escalate, there will be an opportunity to review those and amend them.
Thanks, Councillor Sean. Any other questions, councillors? No, being there no further questions, could I have someone to move the recommendation before you? The Council adopt the 22-23 Register of Fees and Charges Attachment 1 and the 22-23 Register of Cost Recovery Fees and Charges Attachment 2 with an effective date of 1 July 2022 and concluding on a date of a subsequent council resolution varying the relevant fee or charge. We have a moved by Councillor Shine, seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. Those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Councillors, we move then to adjourn. In fact, we move to close the meeting. Move to adjourn, and then Councillor Antonio can do the economic development. Moved by Councillor Antonio, seconded by Councillor McMahon. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Would you like to just stay there for this particular one?
I don't think my microphone is working.
No, it's not.
Give it another try.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Just before you close, if you don't mind, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, you put your hand up.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Just with your indulgence, I'd just like to let councillors know we've lost our Economic Development Officer, Seamus Garmany, unfortunately. I think he's been here for 10 years. And he is going to work for TISBE for Study Toowoomba. So I'd like to publicly thank Seamus for the work that he's done here for Toowoomba Regional Council. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. So we're back to the Finance and Business Committee. So could I ask someone to move to close the session? Moved by Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Rebecca. Those in favour? Appreciate it. Thanks, Brendan. Councillors, we move then to the recommendation of item number 8, which the recommendation is the Council note the contents of the confidential report entitled 2022 Annual Valuation. If someone moved by Councillor Shine, seconded by Councillor Von Hoff. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, that concludes the Finance and Business Strategy Committee for the month of May. In fact, it concludes all the committees. Now we're finished. So, we'll now break. So thank you. Thanks very much.
Mr. Chair, if I could